And on behalf of our principal investigator, Dr. Linda Goggin, and myself, welcome to the National Family Support Technical Assistance Center's Office Hours running series. Today's topic is Celebrating Success, the Importance of Messaging. I'm Gail Cormier, the Project Director of NASTAC, the Family Center of Excellence. We are led by the National Federation of Families. This monthly office hours series is designed with the family workforce in mind. This series is targeted for family-run executive directors and emerging and current family leaders. NASTAC wishes to support all of the family support workforce. This will be this year's last office hour until our new fiscal year. In September, we will pick right back up with our workforce development events. Those workforce development events will focus on family peer specialists, something very close to my heart. I urge you to look for upcoming notices in late summer about those events, and I'd love to see anyone who has the lived experience and is or will be or is currently a family peer specialist at those events. Before we start our interactive conversation today, I would like to go over a few housekeeping items. Today's conversation is being recorded. The recording and any additional resources will be uploaded to our NASTAC website under the Events tab. If you have any technical difficulties, please type your comment and someone will be able to assist you. Please also type your questions for the presenters in the chat box. We'll be watching the chat during the entire presentation. You can type them in during the presentation, or you can raise your hand at the end of the presentation and ask John yourself. Our goal for office hours is to encourage a conversation between our guest presenters and all those in attendance. We encourage you to ask questions that will assist you in your daily work. We will unmute participants after the presentation portion is complete. If you can use the raise your hand button, that would be helpful. NASTAC hopes you leave this event invigorated and with new ideas to help you do your work. We ask that you take time to complete a short feedback survey using the link provided at the end of this presentation. This survey will help us continuously improve our events, and it also fulfills our SAMHSA funding obligation to provide them with the important data required by our contract. Please note, all information will be confidential and we will respect your privacy. We do not offer CEU credits for our events, but you will receive a certificate of attendance after the survey is completed. I would now like to thank SAMHSA for allowing us to share this information with you today, and thank you for joining us. At this time, I would like to introduce Dana, our NASTAC project manager for this series. Dana will go over our family-driven language and introduce John today. Thank you.
Thanks, Gail. Thanks everyone for being here for our last office hour of this series. We want to remind you that when you do engage in conversation with us towards the end of the hour, that you use family-driven language that's trauma responsive, strengths-based, avoids blaming caregivers, is inclusive, person-first, respectful, non-judgmental, and consistent with the actions that we all have agreed to as the family peer workforce. Thank you very much for being part of this office hour. Our goals for the series, which was titled Supporting Organizational Wellbeing and Leader Success Through Mentorship, were to support executive directors and emerging leaders in family-run organizations through peer support, to increase knowledge of leadership, management, and mentorship skills, to provide a roadmap towards organizational well-being, to enhance staff satisfaction, family engagement, and organizational sustainability. Each hour, we brought you new skills, strategies, and tools from subject matter experts, gave you some tips for mentorship between established and emerging leaders between sessions, and facilitated some peer discussions about experiences, what's working, and challenges. We also gave you an action plan that'll help you implement small steps each month to enhance organizational well-being by this month, the end of our series. If you weren't able to join us for all or most of our office hour events, you're in luck. We are developing a program guide so that you can do this program again with a new mentor or mentee, or start the program from scratch in an 8-month period, a 4-month period, 16 months, whatever works for you. So please make sure to be on the lookout for that in the coming months. And we're always here for your questions. We're going to start out with a question for you. If you can go to menti.com and type in the code 58524225, it's going to allow you to answer the question, how is your organization currently sharing your successes? Gina put that in the chat for you, and you can go ahead and type a brief answer to that. How are you sharing your successes? If you're having trouble making it to menti.com, you can also put that in the chat. Your organization might be verbally, says Candelaria, sharing with the United Way. Perhaps that's a funder. Someone's new to the company, but there's a PR department. They also do Employee of the Month. Highlighting in the annual report and monthly newsletter. This is all great information to hear. We'll give just about 30 more seconds, but you can keep putting those in, and we're going to share these with the follow-up email as a part of the slideshow. So keep putting in these ideas. It's always great to get new ideas from each other. Annual reports, conference, social media, board meetings, Instagram, Rockstar of the Month, Facebook, a website with highlights, creating space for the team to report out strengths and celebrations at the beginning of staff meetings, all great ideas. So keep adding to that throughout our time together. And again, we'll share that with the follow-up email. So now I'd love to introduce John Ferrone. He's the principal of Ferrone Associates. He's a business and management consultant, organizational and personal coach, and motivational speaker who challenges people and organizations to articulate their vision and to be their best, as well as empowers them with tools to pursue their future visions. Working with for-profit and philanthropic organizations for more than 25 years, he's helped them achieve focus and build momentum. You can read the rest of his bio when you get these slides. I'm not going to take up any more of the time so that I can pass it over to him to share his wealth of wisdom with you. John?
Thanks, Dana, and thanks, Gail and Gina. I'm really honored to be here and have this opportunity to speak with you. I have exactly 20 minutes, I've been told. It's a very strict timetable to get through a lot of information. So I'm going to be speaking, I'm going to turn on my, fast speech and move quickly, but you'll see that all of the information is in the slides as well as in the handouts that are linked in the chat box. And always can follow up with email if you have questions that go beyond our time together today. So I'm speaking to you today about messaging for sustainability, and basically who needs to hear what so that your organization thrives. And I'm going to ask Dana just to kind of advance slides for me. So as we look at this concept of sustainability, that's a word that gets tossed around quite often. And we're going to spend a little bit of time defining exactly what I mean by that. And hopefully you'll appreciate that definition and put it to good use. We're going to understand what parts of sustainability need to be shared in your pursuit of sustainability. So that makes sense. You're going to define sustainability as actually a process, and then understand that there are a lot of components of information inside that process that then become the story of sustainability. And then I want you to understand who your audiences are, what they need to hear. We'll talk about the different communication channels they may respond to, and define a call to action for each audience. And then finally, kind of cut over to the framework tool that I created, just sort of a one-page snapshot that ties it all together for us. Next slide, please. So again, simple goals in this 20 minutes, because there's a lot of information. It is more complex than what I'm going to present, but my hope is that the way I'm presenting it will help you understand kind of the key variables and then how they fit together, so that you can then be positioned to think about what is best for your organization as you try to tell the story of your organization and achieve sustainability. Next slide, please. So sustainability, this is something, gosh, I don't know when I first wrote this definition, but it has stood the test of time. And I'm going to read this, just this first paragraph, because it's exactly what sustainability is. When an organization successfully delivers value in exchange for revenue and can do so consistently and in a planned and projected manner to continually attract investment, then it has achieved sustainability. Now, one of the things I always like to point out to family-run organizations, which I've coached and consulted many of them over the years, and have also benefited from that, having two children with some mental health challenges that they've dealt with their lives. So that I've learned as well, and that's helped me help them. But one thing I've always pointed out is that as a nonprofit, you still are a business. So you incorporate with your Secretary of State, typically in the state where you reside, and you may pursue your 501c3 federal tax status. But basically, you are a business. And what that simply means is that you deliver a service and or a product in exchange for some type of income. It may be a fee for service, but that's not typical. Usually you try to do your services for free or on a prorated sliding scale. Most of your funding, I'm going to guess, probably comes from state agencies that are paying you to deliver the service on behalf of their agency and to collaborate with you. Sometimes it's from a foundation. You get the idea. There's money coming in and there's services that you are delivering. So that's the revenue, and that's the value that you're delivering and the revenue you are receiving. And so each of these items, the underlined items, I've kind of put out in a bullet point just to kind of further define them. I'm not going to read through these. I think they're pretty self-evident. But when, again, you put it all together, that's the type of sustainability that I always try to encourage organizations to try to pursue. So let's use that as a definition and background kind of going forward. Next slide, please. Dana, oh, there you go. So this is a picture of the model that I use to explain the different components of sustainability. And what I'm actually going to do is share my screen and make that a little bigger for you. Here we go. How's that? Can everyone see that? That hopefully maybe a little bigger.
A little better.
A little better. All right. It made a little difference. So in the top left, you'll see the start button, if you will. Most people like some place to start in a model like this. I'm going to briefly explain this and you'll see how these parts fit together. And I do want to give you the quick history of this as well, because this came from working with 7 family-run organizations in Nebraska, which is where I'm located. And this is back in 2006. And as I worked with the different boards of directors and executive directors, if you use the word mission or vision or even measurement, sometimes you get different answers when you ask what did those mean. You get different answers from the different board members and then even from one organization to the next. So I decided to try and create a model that explained these concepts so that everyone could speak in kind of a common set of terms. So not only within an organization, but from one organization to another. So top left, you've got the start button. You don't have to start there. Typically the top left quadrant, which includes the blue triangle and dark blue box, and then the first green triangle. Those are kind of like the starting point. You've got your mission right in the middle there, which is the purpose of the organization. And then you're going to bring some sort of context to your first discussion about your vision of where you want to get to. So that's your SWOT outlook, which is your strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. Typically a board and staff will do that together, maybe separate, but blend their answers and start to think about your future, given your current situation. And all of that becomes input up into the visioning exercise, which in layman's terms, those are the kind of the words on the outside of each of the boxes. It's where do we want to be? What will our impact be? So if we live up to our mission statement, what impact, what will be different about kind of the people's lives that we're trying to serve or our community? What impact are we going to have? So when you can start to articulate what you're hoping to accomplish, that then becomes the big picture goals. And that launches you kind of around clockwise this model. So we get to the second green box on the top right, big picture goals. And the reason we write big picture goals is so that we know exactly what we are after, what we're trying to accomplish. Because when a donation comes in, let's say you didn't ask for it and you say, well, what are we going to do with this money? Well, you can look to your goals and say, well, where do we need to allocate that funding so that we achieve our vision? Once you have your big picture goals, that drives both your measurement planning. So you see the arrow that goes down into measurement planning as input. It also goes around to the right and becomes the input to operational planning. So let me talk about those quickly. Measurement planning obviously is your ability to measure your outcomes and your activities, especially as they are related to those big picture goals. And that's important to downstream branding, marketing, and fundraising. And so that's that dotted line of input that goes out to the bottom left over there. Let's go back over to that operational planning on the right side. This is where you're actually taking time to ask yourself the question, say, hey, we've identified this big picture goal. Do we have what it takes, what is necessary in terms of resources, whether it's software and technology or office space or the right staff or the proper number of staff? We have the right policies and procedures, we have funding, whatever it might take to accomplish that big picture goal. So this is kind of the reality check. And that leads to your implementation planning where you say, okay, these are the things we have to put in order, who's going to do what in order to implement and make this our programs and our approaches successful so that we can achieve our vision. So you can see these arrows, if you follow them backwards, everything is going to come back to your vision, which obviously is driven by your mission statement. Well, let's say your implementation planning goes well, you've got your project plans, you've done things well, then that enables sustainability planning because without everything beforehand, your sustainability planning is going to be pretty hollow and pretty shallow. And I guarantee you, potential donors, potential funders, they will see through that, as some of you may have already found out. And what we want to do with sustainability planning is build on everything that has happened so far and be able to tell our story. And that leads right into the branding, marketing, and fundraising, which is over on the left. And that's the bottom left, and that's your final act of taking your story to a potential donor. Now, I know this is very high level, and there are many questions about each box and how do you do each one well. But at the very highest level, your board and executive director, for example, could look at this model and say, well, what have we done for each of these boxes? And the simple question is, if we're sitting in front of a donor and they say, why do you deserve this $10,000 check that I want to write as opposed to this other organization that has just a good mission and they've got some good outcomes and so forth? Your ability to describe this capacity and how you followed all of these boxes and how one thing builds on another, that is the capacity that you're looking to explain so that they know that if they give you the money, you will do good things with it. So it's a high-level organizational capacity model. You account for these things, your story is that much more credible. All right, so I'm going to jump back to the slide presentation and ask Dana to take over. Okay, so on that next slide then, what about sustainability needs to be shared? We have the discernment process and the mission. So why is that important? When you say to a potential donor, yeah, this is our mission, but this is why it is our mission. And this is the need that we understood and discovered and we are responding to. And then our vision statement and big picture goals, we want to be able to explain why they are what they are, your discernment process there. Talk about your operational planning, talk about your evaluation plan and the results if you have them already. Talk about your implementation plan and results and your marketing, branding, sustainability planning. Again, these are the elements of that organizational effectiveness. And I'm going to give you a quick analogy as to how this makes sense for your organization. You've probably all been in a situation where you've had to hire someone and you're down to maybe the 2 or 3 most qualified candidates, and you bring them in for a final interview, and they're all qualified, right? Any one of them could probably do the job, but you want to pick the best one for your culture, but you also want that opportunity to look them in the eye and talk with them and hear them speak to you genuinely about their history and their patterns and how they get things done. And you will probably end up hiring the one who can tie their career experiences back to some core basics, things that they value, things that drive them forward. And you see the connection and it just resonates with you. And we've all had that experience. That's the person we hire. It's the same with an organization. The more you can tell how you got to what you're doing and why you're doing it, the more believable and credible you are and worthy of that donation or that investment. Okay, next slide, please. So there are many audiences, as you all very well know. Got some listed here. What I like about this particular image is that you can see not one is connected to everyone, but everyone is connected to each other and through other people, through other entities it could be. And so word gets out. And this image speaks to one thing, and that is branding, or in other words, reputation. So the more you can tell your story effectively, someone is going to be impressed and they're going to say how impressed they are to someone else. And word gets around, and that starts to build the brand that you want as the backdrop for your sustainability efforts. These these audiences will come up again in the worksheet and the tool that I created. Let's go to the next slide. So here we have, again, another list. These are the basic platforms that you use to communicate. Obviously, there are many applications and technologies that you can apply, whether it's to do videos or chatting or instant messaging, social media. But these are just kind of the generic sort of platforms, if you will. And I like to put this out here because, again, it demonstrates the complexity of messaging. Not every channel is perfect for every audience member who was on the previous slide. So you can start to see it becomes sort of a matrix, and how do you figure that out? And I know that that is a very obvious point to so many of you, if not all of you, but it does help to call it out and start to say, okay, so from the first model with all of the boxes, the elements model going around in a circle, and then your audiences and now your channels, when you put it all together, there are many different permutations, and giving that some thought is going to help you be better prepared to pursue sustainability. Let's go into the next slide, please. So the call to action. So in one way, you do want to just be putting information out there. I understand that, and that is good to do, to have a presence in whatever channels that you are using. However, a specific call to action is something you want to try to achieve. And what do I mean by that? It's really inviting the audience member to have a response of sorts. And you can tailor that. You can kind of decide what response you're looking for. Look at the one on the bottom left. I'm asking for you to consider being a lead donor for our campaign and to consider a gift of $100,000. To some of you who might be really small, that's a really big number. To others, that's not so big of a number. But plug in whatever number you want. It is a direct ask to be a lead donor. Well, what was the messaging? What was the channel that was used? What was the story that went behind this particular ask? So that's a good example of a call to action. How about the one on the top right? I'm writing to provide an update regarding how successful our board retreat was. Now, you're not specifically eliciting a call to action here, but it's implied. The implication is that you want them to be updated, so you want them to learn. You want them to spend some time to be invested in the success of your board and how things are coming along. Perhaps this is a person who made a donation. Perhaps it's someone who you're going to ask for a donation from. And then let's do one more. How about the kind of top center, an advertisement that showcases a success story and how a donation leads to more success. And that's, again, an implied ask to say, look what we did. And when you give us money, we achieve these outcomes. So you want to give us money, don't you? So that's kind of what your angle is there. And these messages can take many different forms. And you can kind of read through those and think about the ones the exercise that you did just before we started about your successes. That fits very well into this particular slide. You could probably take each of those channels that you mentioned and talk about the different successes that you've used and go back and look and say, what was our call to action? And if there wasn't really one, direct or implied, how can we start to add that to our messaging? Let's go to the next slide, please. And this is where we get specifically into audiences and calls to action. And I'm not going to read through these because I know I'm pressed for time here, but I did want you to just see that I took each audience member and I kind of broke it down. I'll pick one from each category. So the top one, families. Will you participate? Will you refer or evaluate or share your story? Those are calls to action that might be relevant to your families. How about the next one, community partners? Will you contribute or participate or help market for us, market our services, market our brand and name? And a third category down there was it started with professional community. Will you refer us? Will you support us and connect us, connect people to us? Will you be a guide in our community to our services? And when I say categories, by the way, I just meant, I should have said groupings. These aren't specific categories, they're groupings of bullets. So I just wanted to talk through 3 specific examples there and show you how that information can work for you. Let's go to one more slide and then we're going to tie it all together. These are some examples. So talking yourself through one of the sequences, and they kind of end at the same place. But if you are starting with an audience, you're going to say, this is my target audience. And here's why. So that's the because. What's my call to action? I need them to ... This is just sort of a little worksheet list. And this is the best channel for delivering this message. And then finally, which will contain this call to action. And if you look on the right side, if you end up starting with the topic, this is what I need to communicate to this audience. And I need, so numbers 3, 4, and 5 are the same. And so don't feel paralyzed trying to figure out, should I start with an audience or start with a topic? Either one that you start with, you can end up with the same goal and the same end as long as you follow the pattern. So at this point, I'm going to share my screen again and show you the, let's see, the framework. Here we go. So this is a one-pager that I put together that it really is a snapshot. It is not the end all of communications. It's a place to start. It's a place to kind of challenge your thinking, whether you're an executive director in the zone at midnight, and you're drinking coffee and you're trying to think about what to say to whom and how that all fits together. Or maybe you're a board committee, maybe you're a committee of staff members thinking about this, the marketing person. It's just a place to start. So on the left, you find the audience that you happen to be trying to communicate with. The next column is the always, assuming it's been earned. There's always a thank you somehow in there, and thank them for something specific. And so, for example, families, thanking them and for participating might be, and how can we do more is a good question to always ask. A potential donor, maybe you're thanking them for their time. Elected officials, thank you for your encouragement and championing our cause. And then you get to a primary message. So these are some kind of ticklers is what I might call them. And that would be an opportunity just to kind of expand on these. You might think of something totally different, or whatever your primary message is, but these are some examples and some good places to start. So again, potential donors. Our mission is one that you might value. I'm not saying that those are the exact right words. That's a pretty good kernel statement right there. And to build on that and to shape it into something that you want to expand upon is what's going to be helpful. The secondary message then, what suggestions do you have? That's up to the families. So you're always going to thank them. You're going to have a primary message, which in this case was, we exist for you. Your participation helps us help the next family. By the way, what suggestions do you have? Following that one all the way across, the typical and primary channels for families. I have always found email, phone, and text at this point, and I know that is going to be different for different organizations, but typically those are the go-to. Some people and families really do prefer, I guess, what snail mail, right? So, and then the secondary channels in person, if you get the chance. Actually, the in-person might be the primary channel, but that's assuming you've got that opportunity to be in front of them or with them. So this kind of is assuming that you don't have a chance to be right in front of someone in the moment. Let's go back down and look at potential donors right in the middle there. So that primary message, our mission is one you might value. Secondary message, these stories demonstrate the impact of our programs. Would you consider supporting a program with a donation? And then typical primary channels. I have found with potential donors, emailing to make contact is kind of where donors are at this point. They usually have a screening process as well, or maybe someone screening on their behalf. And then at some point, you hope to get to an in-person invitation for a sit down to discuss. And so that's kind of the way that works. So I just want to give you an example of how this framework works, because again, it ties together the audiences, the messaging, the call to action, and the channels. And again, I threw in the whole elements of organizational effectiveness, again, this model, because I wanted you to know that this is where your content comes from that goes into your messaging. And so that's kind of how it all ties together and hopefully positions you to deliver some powerful messages in whatever circumstance you find yourselves in and whatever you're trying to pursue in terms of sustainability. Other, I guess, Dana, if you want to take it back over and we can get to kind of the end and discussion. How am I doing on time?
Right on time, John. I think if you want to have some remarks to close it up, we can then head over to the facilitated discussion with Gail.
Okay. So I missed that first part. So you wanted me to make some closing remarks about all of this?
Yeah, if you just want to take a minute or two to wrap it up, that's fine.
You mean I had extra time is what you're telling me. That's great. All right. Well, the thing I guess encourage you to do, let's say you're an executive director. Take that worksheet or that framework and kind of sit down with and the model. It might be an interesting question to kind of discussion to make maybe an hour with your board of directors during a meeting, a special meeting or something, to talk through it and say, how are we doing with each of these? And what type of content can come from each of those boxes that will then kind of populate our messaging inside this communication framework. And so those two go together, and that's how I would use those. So yeah, if there are any questions I can answer, that'd be great.
John, this is amazing. I particularly like the audience worksheet where you have it really plotted out. Many times we get a request from many executive directors and family leaders that say, please, do you have anything that's a template or something we can pull from? You just gave every executive director and family leader what they've been asking for the past year. So take it from me. If you're watching this, make sure you get that PDF. I see that Dana's going to attach it as a PDF as well as a Google Drive. I think that that's an amazing tool. That is really, really good. The other thing I'd love everyone to know is a lot of my skills as an executive director came from sitting with John. And John led several different discussions in developing another national nonprofit that really brought together and honed my skills and as an executive director. So you're talking to one of the leaders in the industry to help you and your skills as an executive director running a nonprofit. So John, I just wanted to tell you, thank you for being here. We have a couple.
I appreciate that, Gail. That was generous because you came with a whole big skill set before we met. So
You just helped us hone
we
it.
learned from each other, put it that way.
Well, trust me, the feeling's mutual. Can you sum up what you hope today's attendees can take away from this presentation?
Yeah, well, great question. I would go back to that slide earlier on that kind of had those two goals, but if I were in your shoes as an attendee, and I know this was high level, my hope was that you saw the key parts to effective messaging, those parts being the content, that's in the EOE model, and the audience, and the channel of communication, and then that call to action concept. And so tying that all together as really the foundation of your sustainability messaging. That's what I hope you take away from this. And again, it's not the end all of answers with these documents. They're designed to make you think and ask questions. And that's what I hope you would take away and try to do.
Well, I'm going to ask everybody now to put on their cameras if you feel comfortable. Take off your mute and put on your mic and get ready to ask questions. This is your time to ask our expert today and to each other questions about sustainability. And as people are getting their questions ready and I see hands coming up, I'll ask you one more question. A lot of executive directors are feeling overwhelmed and don't stop to celebrate their successes. Is that time to celebrate really worthwhile when you have so many other things to do?
Oh, that's a tough position to be in. And I can tell you, it is a downward spiral if you don't stop to celebrate. And here's what I mean by that. People need validation. Validation comes through celebration, whether it's, we did a great job as a team. And of course, we have individuals to highlight. But when you take a moment to celebrate, you're re-energizing people. And if you're not doing that, if you're not taking that time, you really risk burning people out, and then they leave. And then you spend more time trying to onboard new people. And we don't have time to celebrate because we're too busy onboarding new people. So it's a downward cycle. It's all about your culture. And I wholeheartedly agree that celebrating is a necessary component, especially in family-run organizations that have such unique stresses upon them and the people running them. So celebrate, yes.
Any questions? I have one other question then. Well, people are still thinking, boy, this group's kind of quiet today, but when thinking about the various audiences and communication channels, which one gets an organization with limited bandwidth the most bang for their buck?
Huh. That's a good question too. Well, I think we have to define the phrase limited bandwidth, because you could have limited funding, you could have limited staff to kind of create the communications. You just might have limited time in general, maybe limited means. We only have a handful of different channels right now. So let's pick a couple of those. If we have limited funding, I would think strategically, and I know I have seen this before, where organizations have made use of a well-crafted one-page email sort of newsletter that they put in there that specific thing to say, hey, we need help getting this word out. Please forward this to 5 people or something like that you can think of. So that goes a long way. It's free to do, except for the time it takes to pay your staff member to write it, or maybe a board volunteering. That would be even better. And so that goes a long way. And there's a record of it, and you can recycle that again and again. So that's always a good way. And then obviously your website presence. Some of you may have a dynamic website, meaning that you're able to update the information regularly and often. And with new content, maybe it's weekly, maybe it's monthly, whatever it might be. But then you still have the challenge of how do you get people to your website to see that information. So that's kind of a two-step process as well, saying, hey, check out what's on our website. But if it's there, and it can be out there, and you can catch someone when they are ready to see it. It's not it's not like, oh, we missed the radio ad that ran for 3 weeks. No, well, this is on our website. It's there. You can go see it. So I'd say longevity of the message itself, and how long it can stay kind of on the shelf and be seen. That's going to be your best bet for thinking about limited funding. So.
Mhm. John, I know from experience that if you aren't celebrating your successes, the state and your funders don't hear about them, and they don't think you're actually having any. And I've always said, if you can't put it in writing, it didn't happen. So really, if it's in writing on slides, speaking at different meetings, if you don't say it and it isn't documented somewhere and promoted somewhere, that's when funders say, what are they doing?
Yeah. Testimonies, I think, are also a great way to capture that message about your organization, your successes, and what's worthy of celebration. Again, because your testimony can be out there for as long as you're online, as long as you're able to send it out or bring people to it. So when you have a large event, for example, let's say you have a fundraising event, trying to capture some testimonies during that event, so that your funding agency isn't always listening just to you, but they are seeing messages come from people who were at your event and who are credible and can provide that effective message. So it's on your behalf. So that's, I would leverage that if you're having any kind of event or you have someone who can provide a testimony.
Yeah, and I have a private message that made a comment, and they said, and make sure, even if you're frustrated with how things are going as an executive director, make sure you keep your negativity on the down low, because that spreads throughout the state as well. So if things aren't going perfectly, you don't have to lie about it, but you should make sure you don't overly advertise it. And thank you for the person who added that. Also, several people are having some difficulty understanding what a SWOT analysis is.
Okay. So a SWOT, SWOT, stands for strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. And that's inside that blue box to the right of the triangle on that model. So if you get a chance to look at that again, but basically that's, when I do that with an organization, usually it's the board of directors, the executive director, and the staff. We go through an exercise. Many of them like to do it without being in person because they want to be able to say what they really think and feel. And so I kind of become sort of a broker of neutrality. So someone might say, we might go and say, okay, what are all of the strengths about this organization? We have a great executive director, we have a great board, and get very specific sometimes. We have software that we can use. We have relationships in the community to leverage. And so you make a list of all of your strengths. And then you get to weaknesses. And if you're in person, it gets kind of silent. But again, if you do it before the meeting, you send all the information, whether it's to me or some facilitator that you're using. What I like to do is I like to synthesize everything, and I'll take out really pointed personal comments if there happen to be any, but maybe instead highlight the general sentiment. So for example, if someone says, Let's say it's a staff member who says, our board of directors keeps shutting down our executive director and we can't get anything done. Wow, okay, well, that's very real for that person. How do we deal with that? Am I going to put that statement up in the list of stuff and just kind of throw the whole thing into a negative dynamic? Well, no, what I'm going to say instead is that I'll take that statement, I'll translate and say something to the effect of the board of directors and the executive director have an opportunity to do more strategic planning together and find a path forward and leverage everybody's talents. And so, because that's ultimately what you're hoping to get to. So let's, instead of focus on that negative, like that person's comment to you, this is internal, but instead of focusing on the negative status, let's instead focus on what we're trying to get to. And so when you get through the strengths, the weaknesses, the opportunities that are in front of the organization, and then the threats are more like, big picture threats. For example, let's say you've got a team that they do great TikTok videos, and that's one of your major sort of platforms for pushing out great messages. Well, there's a threat that, I don't know if you follow what's going on with TikTok and the software and the Chinese owning it and all that stuff. It's kind of like, okay, I think Montana just banned TikTok or something like that. I mean, I don't know the exact details, but I remember seeing that headline. But we don't know if TikTok as a software is going to be around. So there's a threat there if you are currently making heavy use of TikTok. So that's what a threat is, some outside forces. It could even be an inside force that is, you might say one of our threats is that all of our staff are nearing retirement and we have not done a great job leadership succession or staff succession. We don't have enough money to hire new people. We're kind of stuck and we're just going to fade into the sunset the way we're going. Well, that's a real threat. So calling those things out, when you have all of the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats, you've got kind of a snapshot of the situation or context that your organization is in. And that's where you start to then think about, well, where do we go from here?
Thank you. Carla asks, any advice around ongoing and regular communication of successes in a director's blog? Any negatives that you may have encountered?
A director's blog, meaning, I just want to clarify, so maybe a board of directors has a blog that the board member writes, or
more thinking like an executive director's blog, just to keep everyone informed about, maybe bi-weekly or monthly, just things that the organization has done, other successes to highlight. I just didn't know if there were some negatives that should be considered in developing something like this.
Well, a couple things that come to mind. One would be, is that what I guess what your staff and what your board of directors are going to look at and value. So I'm thinking of you're talking about an internal communication, right? Which it all could also be external. You could do just a public blog as well. And so yeah, is that the right sort of channel that people are going to make use of? And if so, the only other sort of, I guess, thing that comes to mind is kind of what the other person had mentioned earlier, is it's not a forum for processing. It's not a forum for dirty laundry and that kind of stuff about what's going on, or, you can be real about disappointments, like, oh, hey, just want to let everyone know, thank you for working so hard to help us apply for that grant. We were not selected. However, we learned so much through the process, and we developed new insights and new program concepts that we are going to keep those on board and try and move forward, even though we didn't win the grant. Maybe we'll win it next year. So I think it's just, how you package your messages. It's not a forum for, I guess, opening the planning of the organization to everybody and their brother and sister. So that's what I would be careful about.
I got a request, and I don't know how everyone feels about this, or you, John, but someone asked, could we, and I think they're asking NASDAQ, could we open up a private Facebook group just for executive directors to share ideas. I don't know. What do you think of that, John?
I think if you can control it, when you say private, and I think the way Facebook works, there's a moderator and someone has to apply to get in. And you have a code of conduct and it's spelled out in terms of, what, instead of Vegas, what's said on Facebook stays on Facebook. And that's what, there are some people who are going to trust that and others who won't, and that's okay. But for those who decide to engage in that, that could be a nice forum for, oh, where did I go? That could be a nice forum for people to, figure out how to communicate. Let me reset that.
Oh, there you are, John. Well,
Sorry.
if it was directed at NASDAQ, if we could get 5 to 10 people who would think that it's a great idea, please put it in the chat, yes or no, that you'd be part of the Facebook. And I can't promise anything, but at the end of the month, we'll be getting our strategic planning for next year. And if there's enough interest, we'll consider that when we talk about our strategic plan.
I think it's a really great idea, to be honest, because people can always choose to engage to the level that they're comfortable. And that's that, and so you might just be a lurker where you sign up to be part of it and you go read, but you never post anything. That's okay.
Okay, well, we're getting yeses here, so I will put it on our list and see what the NASDAQ team has to say, because I'm open to anything. So a Facebook to Facebook private idea would be good.
I think one last thought about that, Gail, is, and I know you're very inclusive, so this is not a foreign suggestion to you, I'm sure, but you got a great group here who kind of thinking about the idea. If you go down that path, I would invite your, constituents, your members to say, hey, send in your thoughts about, ground rules of engagement, whatever you typically would call that, and then come up with a synthesized draft and send it out to people to sort of approve or weigh in on. This way people know, well, this is what we created, so let's make use of it.
Okay. Jenny, you have a question? Is Jenny here? Her hand's raised. Jenny, do you want to check?
I think that was a vote.
Oh, there was a vote. Okay. Well, yay, Jenny. I'm glad you're on board. If we go back to the slides, we have some final words to say.
Thank you so much. So we have some final action steps to leave you with, and those will also be in the workbook that I'll share with you as a follow-up email. So after this month's office hour, we're going to ask you to reflect on how your organization celebrates successes through messaging to enhance sustainability. Identify ways you can improve your messaging, including which audiences you need to reach and what the best methods to reach them are. And meet with your mentor and mentee one more time. So as Gail said, this is our last office hour of this series for executive directors and emerging leaders. In September, we'll be launching a new series that's targeted at the family peer support workforce. So we have created a brief feedback survey about the whole series to tell us which topic you liked hearing about most, which ones you might want to hear about more in another format, and then some new topics to address that are more focused on family peers themselves in the fall. And then tell us a little bit about how we can improve office hours. We might consider a different format and a different time. We did get a lot of feedback throughout that you want more time with these wonderful subject matter experts. So Gina has put that link in the chat. We would really, really appreciate it if you took that survey for us to just give us a snapshot of how we did for the whole series. You can always reach out to us, excuse me, and John. He's graciously included his email and phone number, so reach out to him with any specific questions. And then finally, we would love it if you could take our feedback survey for this session, you can pull out your phone and scan that QR code or take the survey that Gina is going to pop into the chat. And this survey is really important to us because it helps keep our events free and it helps us improve for the future. So thank you again so much for being with us. And once you close this session, the survey will automatically pop up as well.
Yep, I hope it was informative and a helpful event. And thank you, John, for today. And thank everyone for your participation. Special thanks to the NASDAQ staff for helping us run today's event smoothly. Now, as Dana and I mentioned all during this event, please take the time to fill out our survey. When you exit this event, you'll be redirected to the survey site, and you'll just go there. You could fill out the survey, and after you finish the survey, your certificate of completion will be back. It'll pop up. Thank you so much, and have a great week.